Hello everyone, it's your boy. How you doing? Today I'm drinking 2 glass bottles of Pepsi. I wanted Coke. I wanted Coca-Cola. Shop didn't have Coca-Cola. Very disappointed. So I went with Pepsi in the glass. And to be honest, it tastes no different to Pepsi in plastic. At least with Coca-Cola, they seem to be different somewhat, as you probably all know. Now, today's stream, because I do have a video ready to edit, but to be honest, I just want some instant content out there so I can help entertain you all on my second free day of the week, my last free day of the week before it's back into hell, that is retail. But hey, you know what, it is what it is. And I thought about this for a while, because I saw him, Hunter Avallone that is, announce this response to himself, like, well, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I thought he didn't do it. I thought, well, okay, that's something that I should respond to, because back in the day, for anybody who may have been watching for a very long time now, I actually responded to the very video that he is now responding to. And I did it with the help, I don't think it was a collaboration, I remember it being just me, but I guess it's a collaboration in terms of getting resources and information by a YouTuber. She's no longer with us, as in she is still alive, she's just no longer with us. She's, in terms of either on our side or even, on YouTube. I've not seen her for a while, and she used to be called Equal Rights Advocate. Now, I know what you're thinking, that sounds a bit feminist, Mitch. She wasn't at the time. She was an egalitarian. That's what people used to call themselves back in the day. To differentiate herself from feminists. She was more of an MRA than she was a feminist anyway, but she was also trans. And she helped me respond to his video because, if I remember correctly, it was a pretty crap video, but that's Hunter Avallone for you. Even if he makes decent points, he's so stupid that it's still a crap video overall, if that makes any sense. I don't know. But either way, it is what it is, and we're going to be responding to his video. I think I might just do some quick technical thing before we do anything. Just want to... It might go black screen for a bit. I just want to change something. It should be this one here. Yeah, that's it. It's just so I can go back and forth between the video and my my streaming thing, so I know what's going on, so you don't have to see it, it's a bit silly. This is why I need double monitor setup. So anyway, I responded to that video ages ago, and to be honest, I can't remember a single thing about it. I can't remember. All I remember was I made a video, and I responded to him, because I think, if I remember correctly, this must have been 2015, right? 2015, I reckon. And I think I was still trying to... I still make this content. I do criticise the right when I need to. But back then I felt I really had to, because I still considered myself left-wing at the time. And I thought, well, I'm criticising the left constantly, so I might as well criticise the right. Just to show that I'm not a partisan. And I'm not a partisan. I don't consider myself a partisan even today. And Hunter Avallone was, I guess, easy pickings. He wasn't particularly smart. He was a big YouTuber even back then. He'd blown up, and he made a video that wasn't particularly good. It was a no-brainer for me. And really, the point of this stream is to see how far he has changed in his opinion on transgenders and the truth of whatever that is, and my own. Because I wonder if we flipped in our opinions. It would be interesting. Now, I do remember I had some pretty interesting scientific stuff that Equal Rights sent me back in the day, and some of it's probably true. I can't remember. I think there was some of it was to do with brain structure, or at the very least the way the brain works. I think in certain trans people, I don't know if it's every trans person, but the ones that they tested, they seem to have more female. If they were male to female, they had more female brains, and if they were female to male, they had more male brains. But I don't know if that's every trans person. But it was an interesting thing, because I think he was still trying to say you're men, you're women, and that's that. I mean, yeah, just to a 90% degree, yes, that is true. But if some of them really do have more feminine brains, than they ought to have, then maybe there's something there. But again, I actually think it's still a mental, condition, as opposed to something necessarily physical. I mean, you could not be trans and be a man and still be more female oriented in your brain than male, but you're still a man. It is something that's a bit more complicated than that. But I don't know. Again, I can't remember my video. I just remember I criticised him. So we'll be responding to him responding. Put on slow mode. Learn English, Callus. Learn Mancunian, and maybe you might understand me. Hunter has always been... Yes, he's always been cringe. He has always been cringe, and that has not changed. But I don't know. Maybe this video is actually going to be alright. I don't know if I'm going to get through it all. It's like 24 minutes. But you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it. Anyway, look at the dislikes, if you guys can see this. I did a few adjustments and stuff before so everybody can hear it. If you can hear me, that's fine. I'm just wondering if you can hear him. I'm just going to double check. I'm just going to boost him up and make sure... Yep, that should work, because I don't want to do a Sargon. I'm paranoid of having boomer moments. So anyway, 1.2, so that's, it's not quite a quarter, but it's getting there. It's amazing how he's still big though, despite his shift. Like, did he just replace half his audience with leftists? How is he growing? Because for a while he definitely wasn't growing, and then he turned left, and now look. I mean, to be fair, 78,634k, it's not... It's reasonable, isn't it, I guess? That's 10% of your audience. And usually YouTubers get about 10% watching. I get around about that number, slightly less, slightly more. So, nobody gets 50% unless they're doing really well. So, but I thought this one would blow up, because, he's responding to himself, but I don't know. So anyway, starts off with, like, literally, I just watched it for 5 seconds just to hear the audio. And it starts off with a really bad skit. It's that guy with the glasses level cringe. So let's just watch this.
Man, I'm so bored. What can I do that's really disgusting but is socially acceptable for some reason and will get me lots of attention?
Is that what he's now trying to say he did it for? Right, okay. It was all for the attention. You didn't truly believe it. Okay. I can't but feel that hasn't changed, that this whole shift to the left or to the centre, it's really the left, he hasn't moved to the centre, is an attention grabbing thing, because I think he's realised that the algorithm benefits BreadTube more than it does RightTube or whatever you want to call us. So he decided to shift, because the guy's obviously in it for clout. Now, maybe he does have legitimate feelings on the matter. I mean, you have to have something there to believe your own lies, right? I don't know, guys. I don't know what you think. Hunter and Calvin Guerra. I have no idea who Calvin is. Yeah, he is pandering for clout. That much is very obvious. But look, see, that guy with the glasses. Also, why is this... Is it me? Or is the quality of his video not particularly good? Let's boost that. No, it really is that bad.
I got it.
Oh, what is this? He's doing it! He's doing it! Oh no!
Please, call me Jakelin.
Look at me! Oh, Jakelin. Oh wait, that was the original video? Wait, whoa, this is some Inception shit. That's the thumbnail, by the way, guys. Trans people are icky. Some of them are, but not all of them.
Making a video making fun of transgender people and saying a bunch of lies. Aren't I so edgy?
Yeah.
You are such a hero. Hero.
Hero!
Hero.
Hero!
Oh god. The actual truth. I wonder if I make an appearance. Nah, somebody would have said, wouldn't they? There's no way you saw my video back in the day. Actually, I'm gonna see if I can find my old video and see how many views it got back in the day. I can't imagine it got a lot. Charlieman 93. Hunter Avallone. Oh, my video does not show up. Danny Court shows up though. Fucking YouTube. Hang on. Transgender. Ah, there we are. Charming man. Yeah, I changed it. Fucking hell. 42 minutes. Wow, I got 5,000 views on that. Damn, 42 minutes. I'm so glad my videos aren't that long anymore. But then again, that must mean his original video must have been pretty long if it was 42 minutes. Wow, I got 5,000 views on that, so he could have potentially have seen it. You'll be surprised how many people watch videos of smaller YouTubers, you know, just by accident. Yeah, he is a grifter, yeah. Creative Coffee. The man is, in the truest sense of the word. Although some people claim he's confused, that he doesn't actually know what he believes, but I don't know. I've seen enough people that have flipped from side to side to know that there's something not quite right about it. Like, how can you go from being anti-woke, right? From understanding where the problems are with the arguments that you used to, you know, debate with, right? You can debunk them in 5 minutes. Because there's so many people like this, right? We all know. Shoe on Head, Chris Raygun. I remember hearing, I think Tail Feature actually did talk to her, Miss Misa, if anyone remembers her. Even she admitted that she's actually decided to go back to this stupid ideology. Like, how? How? It just doesn't make sense. How can you go back to believing something you know is wrong? What made you think it's right? I don't know. Once I know that I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't return to the wrong opinion. That just doesn't make sense. Maybe that's postmodernism. Maybe you can change your truth. I don't know. Oh my god. Cringe.
What's up, everybody? It's your favorite gay-looking straight boy, Hunter Avallone, here.
He's self-aware.
Back with another video. Today, I'll be debunking my most challenging opponent, me. That's right, guys. Today, I am going to be watching and debunking my...
He looks older, doesn't he? Compared to the older video. I just noticed that. He looks a bit older.
My old video, The Truth About Transgenders. Now, I made this video back in February of 2016.
Bloody hell, was it 2016? I thought it was 2015. Wow, that's... Time flies, guys, doesn't it? Wow, so that means... Jesus Christ. Everything's kind of falling back into place in my mind. So this means that a lot of the people that I knew who have gone far left went far left in a really short space of time. So from February 2016 to literally post-November, so like 2017, right? They went mental because of Orange Man. Damn.
Before my channel even had 10,000 subscribers, and this...
I thought he was much bigger than that. Really? Wow. I guess... wow. He didn't even have 10,000? How much did I have in 2016? I think I had in February 2016 about 4 to 5 back then on the old channel. 3? Because I got to 9,000 or 8,000 by the end of that year. Maybe the start of 2017 before I switched this one because YouTube decided to crush my channel in May of 2016. That's when I started having issues with the algorithm. Despite doing everything that they want you to do, which was a video every single day. That's what I could do when I had no job back then. Damn. It's really, this is more about me reminiscing than necessarily responding. But like I said, this is like a look back on those times as well to see how I've changed and how he's changed.
This video specifically really blew up.
As did my response video.
Before I knew it, I was getting tons of dislikes. I had a bunch of response videos being made about it.
Definitely saw mine, didn't he?
And I even had mainstream media outlets condemning me. This whole thing was really intense, and this entire situation really built upon some of my notoriety. It really set in stone my reputation as a transphobe. Thankfully, I've gotten older, and I've matured, and I no longer dislike transgender people.
You didn't even come across as necessarily disliking them in the video. I don't remember you ever saying that you hated them or disliked them. You just told home truths. Well, you thought you were telling home truths, or just telling it, you thought you were telling it like it was. I don't remember you ever really being hateful towards them in hindsight. You didn't actually dislike them. Like, you can say that you dislike them, you can twist it in that way if you want, but I don't recall you ever truly saying that kind of thing. Spinosaurus Skin 2.0, yeah, but the guy actually has a kid and he has a girlfriend, which he did try to run away from, to be fair, God nom, so... Well, they were arguing 2 plus 2 equals 5 because 4chan convinced them to do so in another, like, you know, gay op, so... But yeah, he's matured, hasn't he? Right, yeah, a sign of maturity is to think that everybody in this demographic is now nice because you've been shown the error of your ways because your channel's not doing so well after that. Honestly, he was better when he was a cringy right-wing guy. He really was. At least we could, at least he was funny.
Looking back, I think a lot of the reason that I did dislike trans people was because I didn't really understand trans people. I didn't really get them, and I kind of met that confusion with aggression
You weren't really aggressive in the video, you were just edgy.
Rather than actually trying to understand. Not only did I just not understand trans people, but I also had a really strong emotional response to the entire just issue of transgender people. I would sort of tell myself that the reason I didn't like trans people is because the facts and the logic and the common sense or whatever, but what it really came down to was I had a deep emotional disliking. They made me uncomfortable, and that was pretty much it.
Was it? Really? Because this seems like a script. Like, you know, yeah, I had all these logical, researched opinions, which weren't particularly good. This is what he's kind of saying. But really, what it boils down to was I was emotionally affected by them. I found them icky and gross. Okay? I don't believe that. I mean, he'll get into the video soon, I hope. And hopefully he goes through at least most, if not all of it, because I really want to see just how hateful he really was in this video. Because I don't know if his original video is even up now, but that's not what I remember, and I don't remember him ever really espousing opinions like that. He was just... I guess he was trying to say things like what Ben Shapiro would have said about trans people, which is not hateful. He was, you know, when Ben Shapiro talks about them, he just says, look, you can live your life the way you want, but you've got to remember you are not biologically female. You are a man. You are biologically male, but you've gone through this surgery to fix whatever it is that is wrong with you. I guess that's what he was trying to say back in the day. I don't know. But, I don't know. Let's have a look at the chat. Jasio sent me $10. Laughing. Is that a doge? Is that like a Japanese thing? I don't think Hunter is a grifter. I think he's an idiot, try-hard right-winger who didn't understand what he was saying or doing, and now he regrets it. It could be. I could give him the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know. Even back then, he was kind of a try-hard, you know, like as you say, and that doesn't necessarily mean he was honest in his in his try-hardedness. Woo! Better out than in, guys.
But once I was able to actually acknowledge this and let go of some of these soy boy feelings, I was
get you trying to subvert my expectations there.
able to actually look at the transgender issue critically. So I've pretty much...
So what he did was not critical, it was emotional despite the facts and the logic, okay?
gone full circle. I've gone from claiming trans people have a mental illness,
Which they do. That is a legitimate thing to say. That is not wrong, that is right. Gender dysphoria is called gender dysphoria for a reason. Because it's a mental illness or condition. Whatever you want to call it, there is something wrong with you when you are a man and think you're a woman, or a woman who thinks they're a man. That is something that should not happen. Just like how autism is a mental... It's more of a syndrome than necessarily a mental illness. There's something wrong with you when your social ability is limited. Because remember, human beings are social animals. We rely on sociability and social skills. If they are limited in some way, even slightly, because remember, there are people on the spectrum who, unless you're very clued in on the signs of being on the spectrum, you wouldn't know they are, but they actually are. You know, there's that one thing that inhibits them socially. And then obviously you go worse and worse. as time goes on. Sorry if you can hear traffic in the background. There's something wrong with you if you can't socially function properly, even ever so slightly. It's a mental illness or condition. Not wrong with that. That is true. Now you're just denying science. You claim that you've looked it up more, but actually you're more emotional now than you were before. Now, obviously, I stopped it right in the middle of this sentence. I can hear the leftists already crying. Really? Let him finish. Okay, I'll let him finish.
To telling you right here and right now that trans people are completely valid. So with
Valid in what way? What do you mean they're valid? This is what I don't get. We are valid. We are here. You know, we demand to be accepted. What does that mean to validate a person? Are they not human? Are they not people? To me, the mental illness is a valid thing. That is something that exists, and it's something that needs to be treated. Now, I would say that I'm less and less inclined to believe transitioning is something that every single person who has gender dysphoria ought to go through. I actually don't agree with that. I think the more I've talked to trans people and the more I've looked into it on my own, the less I'm inclined to think it's always good. And in fact, I think, truthfully, the more I think about it, I think that should be the last resort. I think mental therapy, actually trying to get them to realise this is, I don't know, how would you even begin to treat that? I guess it would be like treating schizophrenia, but still, you should try to do something to treat them. To say, look, do you really feel this way? You know, look, let's look at this. Look, blah 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 blah. Work it through them, and if it doesn't work, then maybe the physical thing is the way to go about. I don't think it should be the default thing to do, because once they do it, they can never go back. At the very least, if it's a very long-term process where you have consistent psychological therapy and things like that, you can get to the point where you can decide, yes, this is for me, no, this is not for me. Actually, yeah, I am a man, not a woman. Yeah, I was wrong. I am a man. I just have feminine taste or whatever. I'm not. I shouldn't be confused about that. I don't know. To me, that's not emotional. That is logical. I'm trying to think things through. It still validates them as people, but it's realistic and acknowledges they have an issue they need to address. How is that bigoted compared to what he now believes? I don't know, where he's literally probably thinks that, yeah, this should all just be transitioned, right? If they express a modicum of confusion, I never liked him. He pretty much was a stereotype of right-wingers who think they're chads simply because they're right-wing, like No Bullshit, who's an actual grifter. Yeah, No Bullshit is the truest sense of a grifter. Yeah, he seems to be like getting to drama with JXy now for some reason. Why is he doing that? I don't know. But the guy will do anything for money. Like, again, Battening made that video, and it's true to this day. But yeah, he always was like the stereotypical right winger, wasn't he? Onto Avallone, he really was. Now that I think about it, and now he's a stereotypical leftist or reformed leftist, isn't it? Born again leftists.
without further ado, let's jump into this old video and debunk me. Woo! Hey guys, Hunter Avallone here. Let's stop right away and just appreciate the look. I look like a fucking plastic Hollister model. I look like I'm half human, half mannequin.
You look about somebody who's my age at the time. Wait, how old is Hunter Avallone? Well, let's have a... Maybe I should, I don't know. Let's have a look. How old are you? Hunter Avallone. Age. Oh, wow, he's much younger than I thought he was. Okay, fair enough. He's not my age. He's actually 3 years younger. Oh, well.
And how much product did I put in my hair? Truth is, being transgender is not normal. This look is not normal. Sorry.
Yeah, but being trans isn't normal. It's not the norm. That's right.
But the idea that you're a man trapped in a woman's body, or a woman trapped in a man's body, is simply not normal. So let's stop right here. Being transgender is not normal. What does that even mean?
It means you're not the norm. It means you're not the typical person, because the typical human being knows that they are a man if they're a man, and a woman if they're a woman. Remember, trans people are called trans people for a reason. They are people who think that they are a woman trapped in a man's body, but really it's not like that. It's more like they're born a certain way, but then there's something in their mind that's telling them that they're not that. That's how I see it anyway. I don't know. People call me a TERF for saying that, probably, but I'm not a feminist, so they can't call me a TERF.
Just if something isn't normal, it doesn't mean that it's morally incorrect or wrong in any way. Normal is defined as conforming to a standard, usual, typical, or expected.
Yeah, and in what way are trans people normal or typical? In what way do they meet the typical standard of a human being? They don't. Because they're trans. They're like 0.1 something % of the population. You're not even debunking yourself.
But does or does not meet that standard is up to us.
No. It's not really up to us. It's up to, if it's in terms of biology, right? Because this is a biological question, or even a mental question. It's not really down to us. It's what reality tells us, right? And what reality tells us is that this tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people are not the norm compared to 99% of people. Even gay people, who were like what, 5%? 4% of the population? Even less than that. They're still what you would call cis. Even they're normal by that standard. In terms of what a man and a woman is, they are atypical by a large degree. And you can try and make this a relativistic issue, but it's not.
We as a society create that standard.
No. Nature created that standard. We evolved as a sexually dimorphic species. We are not hermaphrodites like snails or other typical hermaphroditic species. I can't think of any others than snails, really, and slugs. We grew up in nature from apes. We still are apes as sexually dimorphic species, as all mammals are. All mammals are either male or female. That is the norm. There is no mammal that is, as far as I'm aware, there is no mammalian species, as far as I'm aware, that is hermaphroditic. They cannot have sex willy-nilly with either particular person or what have you, and have kids. It has to be a male and a female. And if this hypothetical animal, which is male or female, one of them decides, hang on, I look like a male, but actually I'm a female, that's atypical. And if they might somehow transition to look more like a female, that is incredibly atypical. There's one thing to think it, about there's whole philosophical questions about what the self is and what a person is, but by and large we can figure out what a man and a woman is. But if they start physically trying to, become that thing, that then makes them atypical. They don't, a lot of trans people, as much as they try to look male or female, female to males tend to do this better than female to males. A lot of them don't pass very well. They end up looking atypical. They don't look particularly male, they don't look particularly female, or they look like a man trying to be a woman or a woman trying to be a man. That's the thing. A up, Talmenian. Yeah, he didn't say that though. He's trying to. You're saying that he's saying it's not automatically wrong. It's not wrong. Nobody said it was wrong. That's not what he's saying, Carlos. He's saying that we decide what is and what is not normal in terms of what a human being is. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it's a relativistic thing. That's what I'm getting from him.
At one point, it wouldn't have been normal for black people and white people to get married. Society can greatly influence what is and is not considered normal. And it's important to remember that majority rule is actually an ad populum fallacy.
But he's not committing, you are not committing ad populum in that particular thing. No, that's not what it is. That's not ad populum. What you're arguing is they're not the norm. They're not normal, which they're not. I'm not normal. I think a lot of the people watching this channel are not particularly normal. But, that's for other different reasons. And yeah, at one point it wasn't the social norm for blacks and whites to, what was it? Was it to live, or what was it that you say about blacks and whites?
Greatly influence what is and is standard, usual, typical, or expected. What does or does not meet that standard is up to us. We as a society create that standard. At one point, it wouldn't have been normal for black people and white people to get married.
Well, one, it depends where you were in America and in the world. And in fact, still to this day, in Britain and America, although I think it's probably changing, it's still not quite normal for them to marry each other. You know, I'm mixed race. I'm the product of a mixed race man, or at the very least a black man. Oh yeah, sorry. Bleh. So I'm getting confused between my grandparents and my dad. I am the product of another mixed race person, my dad, marrying a white woman, my mum. And then before that, he was the product of a black man being with a white woman. But they're not normal. They're not typical. We're not a typical family anyway, for other reasons, other than that, but that is still, to this day, not normal, although it is changing somewhat in the two countries. There are more intermarriages now than there used to be, but it's still not what I would consider the norm. The norm is for black people to marry black people and white people to marry white people, because it's a natural human tendency for people to marry people that are more like them, and that's not anything that's wrong. There's nothing wrong about that. That's not the same as trans people being considered not normal or atypical, abnormal. I don't know, I feel like that's a false equivalence. Now there's your fallacy.
Society can greatly influence what is and is not considered normal, and it's important to remember that majority rule is actually an ad populum fallacy. And if we want to talk about this from a statistical standpoint, this right here is how we measure what is and is not normal. If you are outside the first or second standard deviations, then you are not statistically considered normal. So
what does that even mean? Has he even... Has he actually looked up what that could potentially mean? Is it just me? Like, what's he even saying? What are you saying, Hunter? Do you understand? What does that mean? Normal in what way? Is that graph measuring normality as a whole? Or is that normality in a certain way? I don't know what that means. I think I'll just apply Hitchens' razor, because I have no idea if he knows what he means by that. And that just seems like he put that in there because, I need to think of something that looks scientific.
By this logic, blonde hair isn't normal. Green eyes aren't normal.
Green eyes aren't normal. Green eyes are very rare. Blonde hair, depending on where you are in the world, in American Britain, that is actually quite rare. I mean, you do meet blonde people who are naturally blonde anyway, but they're nowhere near as numerous as people with brown hair, black hair, and then likewise, redheads are even rarer than blondes.
Millionaires aren't normal. Having a college degree isn't normal.
Actually, that pretty much, you could argue, is the norm for a lot of people these days, college degrees. Even working class people can get to university very easily if they get the grades.
Being a nurse isn't normal. Being a firefighter isn't normal.
Those are very normal jobs. That's pretty normal. Now, truthfully, to be a fireman, you need a particular physical strength. But that's something that the typical man can easily achieve. Likewise, a nurse is something that a lot of women and men can actually achieve as well. They're actually very normal jobs, and they're everywhere. There is no country on Earth that doesn't have nurses and firemen. That's normal.
Starting a business isn't normal.
That is normal in capitalist countries.
And yet we accept all of these things and more. It would be ridiculous to say that any of these things are immoral because they're not normal.
But you never actually said they were immoral. You kind of strawmanning yourself. Look, they're not immoral because they're not, although they are normal. But whatever, that's stupid. That's stupid. What does that even mean?
So just if something isn't normal doesn't make it bad.
Can anyone explain this normal distribution? What is this? The 68, 95, 99.7 rule. What is that? What does that mean? Democracy is a fallacy. Yes. Hang on a sec, let Let me just get back to this. I don't know. I'm just struggling to work out what his argument is. I just went blank for a second. It's that stupid.
I have no idea why I was trying to make this argument.
You were just... I don't know either. I can't remember why you said it. I'm going to postulate that you said this because you saw that these LGBT activists were trying to make out that these people are totally normal, nothing's wrong with them, that they are the norm and should be considered normal. Now, obviously, if you're a transgender person, you can... How do I... This is the thing, normal is so nebulous. I agree with you, it is nebulous. But when you turn it into a relativistic thing, it's like, it's hard to argue in a coherent way. I personally think it was more the culture thing. You may have discovered what was, the trans culture that was developing around the time, drag, the drag thing and things like that, and you didn't like it or something. I don't know. Maybe you didn't. You thought, well, look, yeah, these people can be normal people in terms of how they act and live in society, but in terms of being who they are, that's not normal, and there's no way of going about that. They are not the norm. I don't know. I can't read your mind. I'm only speculating.
When people get their body parts hacked off and replaced with new ones during a sex change, that simply is not normal. Please stop again.
But it's not. Who does?
You can tell right there just how much emotion I had going in to writing the script for this thing.
No, you sound very unemotional in that video. You sound sardonic almost, if that makes any... I don't know, is it sardonic? You don't sound particularly... Normal is different than moral. They mean different things. And the video? You would think so, right? But he goes on for 24 minutes. I don't get it either, Creative Coffee. I don't think he knows either.
This is just so cucked. This is...
Stop it. Stop trying to subvert the jokes. This is not what being cooked... That video that you made back then is not cooked. What you're doing now is cooked when you're coming up with pseudo-intellectual arguments to justify your new beliefs. That's what it sounds like to me. That is cooked.
It's just feelings over facts.
But it's not feelings over facts. Why are you just... Wait, is it me? Or is he just transplanting his leftist ideology into the language he would use when he was right-wing? So, like... I can, for example, say, oh, well, this feminist is arguing out of feelings because they're talking about the wage gap or something. I don't know. That's facts over feelings. Look, women do this. There's this wage gap, or rather earnings gap as it really is, because of blah, 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 blah. Different jobs, different working hours. Well, they're to talk about how it's unfair because of a thing that they can't prove, the patriarchy and all that, right? And that's really an argument from emotion with no evidence. Maybe you can argue, but he's just taking what the stereotypical skeptic YouTuber, quote unquote, would have said back in the day, but giving it a leftist twist. And he's trying to call himself a cook and saying that what he's saying there is based entirely on feelings when it's not. It is a fact that if you go through a sex change, that's not normal, because 99.99% of people don't go through that.
I was using this, hyperbolic hacked off. What am I even talking about?
But that's literally... Well, okay, not hacked off. But it's still an adequate... It's more... Yeah, it's hyperbolic. But it's still accurate, isn't it? It's just an exaggeration. That doesn't mean you're lying. Again, if anybody's seen Star Trek 2, when Spock is talking on the radio to fool... Thingy Khan into thinking that the Enterprise is wrecked completely, or just very damaged, and then when Savick finds out actually the Enterprise is okay for the most part, she said, "You lied." No, I exaggerated. Exaggerating is not lying. Oh dear. Is his logic, if you say something is abnormal, you are also saying it's wrong and terrible, and we should shun it as a society? I think that's what he's trying to say. I think he's trying to say, if you don't consider something normal, that must mean that you don't like it, ergo, it's bad and immoral, which is not true. Because everybody knows there are people who are not normal that we couldn't possibly run society without, Nobody shuns them or thinks they're immoral. Geniuses, for example, Nikola Tesla, your Thomas Edisons, Shakespeare, these are geniuses, right? They're abnormal, atypical, right? But without them, where would human society be? Where would civilization be? Exactly. And even then, none of the things he said so far in the original video is wrong.
It sounds like I was claiming that a doctor removing a body part is wrong for some reason, yet...
Well, it depends, doesn't it? It can be wrong. So, for example, if the doctor removes a body part when you have a cold, that is wrong. Likewise, as we have now discovered, there are people who want to detransition. And the doctors have removed certain body parts from these people, or have inhibited the growth of certain organs and things like that within these people, and they regret it. That means they themselves, obviously as people, made the wrong decision, but also the doctors made the wrong decision to go along with them. I forgot what the person was called, but they said that the doctors should have challenged him or her. Was it? Now, I think it was a male to female. No, female to male. That's what it was. She wanted to be challenged. In hindsight, she wanted the doctors to constantly ask her, "Is this okay? Is this what you want?" Remember, it's nothing what's the word? It's not unusual to feel confused about certain things like this. Although I would posit that most people, even when they're young, even when they're teenagers, aren't confused about what they are. In terms of gender. I certainly wasn't when I was a kid, but I don't know. That's just me. But, that's what she wanted. The doctors made a mistake with going along with what she wanted. And now, as we see, in many countries in the West, the immediate thing to do is not to give them an evaluation, which is what a lot of my transgender friends in university did. Was it 2 or 3? About 2 or 3 of them were trans at uni. They went through psychological testing back in, I think this was 2013, 2014. 2015, but nowadays, apparently, only a few years later, they're just fast-tracking you through whatever medical system you go through. That's irresponsible, and potentially that could mean having your genitals hacked off, to exaggerate. Now, obviously, transitioning doesn't always imply that. That doesn't mean you don't need your genitals hacked off to transition. Like, Blair White hasn't, as far as I'm aware, and I don't know about anybody else. But again, that's not normal. And that doesn't mean that the doctor is right in doing that.
When a woman gets a bilateral mastectomy where her breasts are removed to prevent breast cancer, it's not wrong for her to do this if recommended to do so by her doctor.
Well, it depends, doesn't it, right? How high the likelihood of getting breast cancer is. Again, you could be 99% likely to get breast cancer in your life, but that's still a 1% chance of not getting it, and to be fair, 1% of people will not get it if they choose not to go with the, mastectomy. But again, it's up to you, isn't it? In that case, you would probably get them removed. But I don't feel like that is something that's applicable. I don't know. Maybe it is actually, yeah. But again, it's different to transitioning, isn't it? Where it's life-changing. At the very least with, moving your breasts, it's not so life-changing, really, if you think about it, because a woman can still live without them. She's not any less of a woman. It's not like cutting off a man's balls, which does actually change him physically and mentally. It turns him into a eunuch. As far as I'm aware, a woman is not turned into a eunuch when she has her breasts removed. So that's not something you can really equivocate.
Despite what the left-wing hypocrites have to say, I don't think we should just shrug our shoulders and accept this very strange behavior. I think we should work together and get these people help.
Again, there's nothing wrong with what he said there. I agree. Now, again, the way I see it is if you want to go through the physical therapy, or the physical operations, that's for you, and you think that's for you, go ahead. I just don't think that should be the default treatment. And I think, at least at the time, Mr. Avallone thinks that, no, you shouldn't at all. But let's see what he thinks now.
We should work together to get these people help. Alright, Hunter Avallone, past self, I have some big news for you. And for everybody watching, here comes the plot twist.
Why does he have such an issue with that statement?
In order to get these people help, we actually start by accepting this very strange behavior. Here's a massive...
But why should we accept it when it is actually ruining lives? And as far as we are aware, a lot of people who go through transitioning, they don't find fulfillment, right? Because there is a large suicide rate. Oh yes, it's going through the well-being thing. So, by the way, I don't have any statistics prepared because I just wanted this as a plain old reaction.
Meta-analysis from Cornell, this search found a robust international consensus in the peer-reviewed literature that gender transition, including medical treatments such as hormone therapy and surgeries, improves the overall well-being of transgender individuals. It's good for transgender people even to just start with socially transitioning. Here's a study on mental health and self-worth in socially transitioned transgender youth. Keep in mind this comes from Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. I'm not reading this from CNN, okay? Listen to what the results found. Transgender children reported depression and self-worth that did not differ from their matched control or sibling peers, and they reported marginally higher anxiety. Compared with national averages, transgender children showed typical rates of depression and marginally higher rates of anxiety. These findings...
I don't think that actually proves his point. Even if they have typical rates of depression, they have higher rates of anxiety. So is it really actually good for their well-being? Because you're still anxious. In fact, you have higher anxiety. Anyway, these findings are in striking contrast to previous work with gender non-conforming children who had not socially transitioned. But again, that doesn't explain the suicide rate. How are these people fine? But then when you actually look at the statistics of people who have operation are killing themselves at record rates. So this is conflicting with the suicide rate statistics that we have, which is, I don't know if it's as bad as the male, the cis male suicide rate, but it's pretty high. Inadvertently compared to being trans to having cancer. That is true, Mac. That is true. He actually did without realising. In the UK, you need to live as the other... Yeah, exactly, yeah. He do be looking cute in that wig, though. I know, right? Maybe he ought to transition. We should pink pill Hunter Avallone. Don't, please. Don't contact him. Don't do
are
that.
in striking contrast to previous work with gender non-conforming children who had not socially transitioned, which found very high rates of depression and anxiety. Here's a study from the AAP News and Journal's Gateway. After gender reassignment in young adulthood, the gender dysphoria was alleviated and psychological functioning had steadily improved. Well-being was similar to or better than same-age young adults from the general population. Improvements in psychological functioning were positively correlated with post-surgical subjective well-being. So it seems pretty settled that transgender people transitioning, whether it's socially or surgically, is the best move.
No, because how come there's a rising number of people who want to detransition? Like, they legitimately want to detransition, and it's a rising number. Let's see if... detransitioning. Let's have a look. How many people is it? Numbers. Let's have a look. I mean, it's already shown me a lot of stuff, so let's have a look. I know this is Wikipedia that I'm probably going to be reading from. Let's have a look. It's probably not a high number at the moment, but I think it's going to steadily increase. Formal studies of detransition have been few in number because, it's something that politically is controversial, as it says here, and they probably don't want to talk about. Of children referred to gender clinics, either gender dysphoria or non... Why the hell would you be referred to a gender clinic because you don't conform? That's insane. That's like they're sending tomboys and girly boys to clinics. Because to me, gender non-conformity is like, oh, you're a tomboy, or you're a boy who plays with Barbie. Or you're or like Boy George. Boy George was gender non-conforming, right? But of course, what they mean by gender non-conforming is trans. That's what they mean. A study in 2008 found 61% desisted from their gender incongruence or non-conformity before reaching the age of 29. And in 2013, study found 63 desisted before age 20. So that means that as puberty begins to end, they realise they're actually men or women, as opposed to the opposite. If Wikipedia is right, which take it with a big grain of salt, so that means potentially a lot of the people who are transitioning now, especially the ones that killed themselves, have probably realised that actually they're not transgender, or it's not solved the issues in their head, or their confusion, or whatever, or something happened along the way. And either the ones who are mentally able to, deal with the issues want to detransition as best as they can, while others seemingly can't find a way out of their hole and decide to end it. Again, I don't trust these. I'm sure these studies have found individuals who have had very good, experiences with it, and there are people who have had good experiences with it, like Blair White, like Rose, Rose of Dawn, who's been on this channel, like ERA. I think ERA as well is a trans woman, and as far as I'm aware, she is doing fine. I've not talked to her for a while, but I don't think she ever expressed regret. So it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And you're now trying to say, from what I can gather, that this should be something that should be adopted as the default thing for them to go under, when it's simply not the case. We shouldn't be doing that at all. It should be up to the individual to decide. I know Wikipedia is not too bad. It's just I don't have time to go through the things that he went through in his video. I don't trust that, when there's statistics of high suicide and people increasingly want to detransition, and the fact that we have many horror stories of people who transitioned only to realise they probably shouldn't have.
I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but I care about facts and I care about reality.
I don't feel that actually represents the facts of reality. They don't even mention the suicide rate in that.
I also want to bring up this study that gets cited by a lot of conservatives. I think even Ben Shapiro has cited this one before, called Long-Term Follow-Up of Transsexual Persons Undergoing Sex Reassignment Surgery. This data basically concludes...
Notice how he's not actually going through the data, he's just reading the abstract. And I know it's probably because of time constraints he's doing that, but it's better to actually go through the study if you can, just to show the actual data, because they're not. The abstract doesn't tell you everything, and there are loads of videos of people who have gone through studies and surveys, and they've just read the abstract, or they show the odd graph. They don't go through the whole thing, which actually breaks it down and gives you more context, and can often actually give you a completely different picture than what the abstract actually tells you.
That sex reassignment surgery harms transgender people and increases their risk of suicide. This, however,
which is borne out with the statistics. They do have a very high suicide rate.
Is really bad data, and the findings are completely flawed. What?
How? In what way are they flawed? Do you know anything about scientific methodology? So basically, the other ones that he mentioned are right, because they tell him that actually trans people do very well. Most of them do very well with transitioning. They're telling you exactly what you want to hear now that you're a reformed individual. But this one, because it's quoted by conservatives, is bad, and now it's flawed. But you've not actually told me why it's flawed. I hope you do, by the way. Let's give him a few minutes.
What they did with the control group is they controlled trans people to cisgender people. They didn't control trans people before the surgery to trans people after the surgery. And even more...
Let's have a look at that. The treatment for transsexualism is sex reassignment, including hormonal treatment, and surgery aimed at making the person's body as congruent with the opposite sex as possible. There is a dearth of long-term follow-up studies after sex reassignment. Objective to estimate mortality, morbidity, and criminal rate after surgical sex reassignment of transsexual persons. It's quite a small font, so I can't read it properly. All 324 sex reassigned persons, 191 male to female, 133 female to male, in Sweden. Random population controls were matched by birth year. Blah 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 blah. So what's the actual thing? Like, hang on, long-term follow-up. Let's try and find that, shall we? Long-term follow-up study. I think that's the one. Sweden. I think this is it, isn't it? I've got it. I'm trying to see the methodology. Let's have a look. It doesn't actually mention the methodology. Population-based matched cohort study. If anybody can understand this, I'm just trying to find the methodology. Here we are, methods. I've got it. The study population was identified by the linkage of several Swedish national registers, which contain a total of 30.8 million unique individuals. Blah 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 blah. Contains discharge diagnoses. Surgical procedure codes could not be used for the study, like a specific co-sexual assignment. I'm trying to find if they go through before or after. Let's have a look. Population-based matched cohort study. We use the individual national registry. Yeah, okay, thank you. One inpatient diagnosis. Hang on. The date of sex reassignment, start of follow-up, was defined as the first occurrence of a gender identity disorder diagnosis or any concomitant psychiatric disorder in the hospital discharge register. If this information was missing, we use instead the closest date in the hospital discharge register. The reason for prioritising the use of gender identity disorder diagnosis after over before was to avoid overestimating person years at risk of sex reassigned person. Right. Hence, this group might also comprise persons that were hospitalised for sexual disorders other than transsexualism. So they were trying to make sure that people that they were studying definitely had gender dysphoria and definitely transitioned. Okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with the methodology so far. But I don't know. Maybe other people who are good at reading these studies can actually, because it's history is my thing. It's not biology, I will admit. But I don't know. I don't think the methodology is that bad. They were just trying to figure out, is the person doing well, right? Because they would still have the psychiatric records of the people, right, to see how they were doing before transitioning, right? And if they haven't done well afterwards, then they weren't particularly doing well before then, right? Maybe it's just, I don't know.
So, here comes the kicker. The author of this study actually has published a newer study.
Okay.
He says now, although many studies were weak and included people at different stages of transition within the same cohort of patients, overall, this review indicates that trans people attending transgender healthcare services have a higher risk of psychiatric morbidity that improves following treatment, and thus confirms the vulnerability of this population.
I don't think that's saying what you think it's saying. I'm just reading it now. They do improve following gender-confirming medical intervention, reaching normative values. The main Axis 1 psychiatric disorders are found to be depression, anxiety, other major psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia. Why isn't it just showing us what the thing is called? There was conflicting evidence regarding gender differences. Some studies found higher psychopathology in trans women, while others found no differences. Although many studies were methodologically weak and included people at different stages of transition within the same cohort of patients, overall, this review indicates that trans people attending transgender healthcare services appear to have a higher risk of psychiatric morbidity that improves following treatment and thus confirms the vulnerability of this population. Now, what kind of treatment? Is that treating mental health issues, or is that going through the procedure of transitioning? Is it? I am going to. They're talking about the psychological thing as opposed to the physical thing, right? And even then, I don't think he's talking about his own study. He's talking about other studies. And still, they're very highly vulnerable to these things, and it improves. But that doesn't mean that in the end they will be better, because there's still this high suicide rate. Again, none of this seems to make sense.
So even the author of the notoriously stupid study that a bunch
It's not stupid, though, because what he's saying is still sort of right, isn't it?
conservatives and people that don't like transgender people like to bring up, even this author is now admitting that the suicidality of trans people goes down and improves following treatment.
Depends on the person, doesn't it, though? Is that in general? Like, what's the actual numbers of people who feel better as opposed to people who feel worse? You've not actually shown me any of the data. You've just shown me his his finding. Like, well, actually, he doesn't even say how many people. And the morbidity does improve, yes, but how many people improve? I don't know. Like what? Again, there's still this really high suicide rate. I'm so confused, guys.
In 2015, a Johns Hopkins psychiatrist named Dr. Paul McHugh says that being transgender is a mental disorder and a sex change is biologically impossible. Although I have no selfish motives for doing
He's still right on that.
this, I'm gonna be a little more charitable to myself right here. I remember seeing this article, and what happened was, back in the day, I was following like all right-wing pages, and I remember seeing this one published on CNS News, which is like a hyper-conservative Christian news source anyway, and all I remember seeing is...
Is it? I've never heard of it. So let's have a look. CN... They're conservative, but doesn't strike me as particularly Christian, though. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're wrong, just because they happen to be like that. I don't know.
Johns Hopkins psychiatrist, transgender mental disorder. Boom! That proved my point. I basically cherry-picked this one, now debunked psychiatrist, who, by the way, isn't even an expert on anything to do with transgender people, rather than the scores of up...
What do you mean? He's still a psychiatrist, right? He still has to look up all these things. So, is it because it might not necessarily be his particular area of study that therefore he shouldn't talk about it? I still think he would know more than any normal person about, you know, transgender people and transgenderism and all that, right? He's still a psychiatrist, it's still psychology, he still needs to learn about it, right? I don't think that's fair, that's kind of poisoning the well a bit.
Updated, newer data completely debunking this guy. So this guy also has a pretty long history of just fighting against gay people's rights and transgender people. Really, really disgusting.
Okay. Okay, so September 10, amicus brief defending California's Proposition 8 ban. He believes that lesbian, gay, or bisexual orientation is a choice. Well, that's funny because last year, right? If I remember correctly, last year, I don't believe this. I don't believe it's a choice or particularly genetic, because this is what came out, right? And this was accepted by a lot of people on the left. Believe it or not, people like Owen Jones. It was discovered last year that there was no gay gene. Because remember, for years there was people saying on the left that there's a gay gene, that they were born this way, and things like that. But then this study found that there is no gay gene, that you're not. There's something else to it. There's an environmental factor. And as far as I'm aware, a lot of the leftist talking heads agreed with that. And seemed to take it very well. That's what I remember. So, I don't know if it's a choice. I don't know if there is something inherent within certain people that makes them prefer the same gender to the opposite. But that study suggested that there's more of an environmental thing about it. And anyway, McHugh, though not a paediatrician, something to do with transgender children. Well, again, transgender children should not be transitioned in. He's right about that. But what was this statement? I'm just going through all this. McHugh's ideas reached the halls of Congress. Anti-trans op-ed. But in what way is it anti-trans? John Hopkins says that gender-affirming surgeries do more harm than good. And that response calls to refute misstatements like this one, express strong and ambiguous support, blah, 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 blah. Let's go through it.
Actually, he's a complete quack who, again, has no
You've not actually shown me what he actually believes and what he's actually said. You're just saying he's a quack and he's wrong because he thinks that gender reassignment surgery is not the best option for these people. And oh look, he happens to be a conservative. He doesn't believe in gay marriage and thinks it's a choice. That doesn't mean he's wrong on this particular question, though. You're saying he's wrong because he's this. That's not
expertise in LGBT issues. He's just commenting on it, and then people treat...
Nobody's saying he's an expert on LGBT issues. He's a psychiatrist. They're talking to him because he's a psychiatrist about a psychological issue.
This one idiot's opinion as if it's the opinion of the Johns Hopkins Medical Institution. In a Baltimore Sun op-ed published in September 2016, several of McHugh's Johns Hopkins colleagues disavowed his report, saying it mischaracterizes the current state of science on sexual orientation and gender.
Now, what department were they of? Were they scientists, or were they in the gender studies department? That's important.
March, Vanderbilt University researchers organized a statement signed by nearly 600 LGBT experienced scholars and clinicians disavowing McHugh's assertions.
Now, what kind of scholar is that, I wonder? And physicians? But why a physician, right? When we're talking about a purely psychological issue. Surely it would be psychologists that they need to sign against that, right? Because this is a psychological issue. Just because you're a physician doesn't mean you're a psychologist.
The statement emphasized that McHugh and his article did not undergo scientific peer review, was not published in a research journal, and contains misleading statements about the state of science on gender identity and sexual orientation.
Like what?
I'm gonna cut myself some slack because I was very much in my own little bubble, in my own little echo chamber, but this
Like you are now?
Dr. Paul McHugh guy is a complete fucking loser.
I feel like this is projection on his part.
He has no idea what he's talking about, and the fact that I actually cited him in my video is embarrassing. Plus, what this psychiatrist even said is just incorrect. Being transgender is not a mental illness.
Yes, it is. It's in the DSM-5, or at least it was. I don't know if it still is now. It is a mental... It's not... Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. How is it not? How is thinking you're being born a male physically, but then as you grow up, you think but then mentally you think you're a woman, or if you're female, you think you're a man. How is that not a mental illness? And bear in mind, this creates horrible things for them. Do you not understand what this does to people? It depends on the individual, but it can range from confusion to outright suicidal tendencies, because there's the physical part of them conflicting with what's going on in their head, and it drives them crazy because they don't know who they are. It makes them suicidal. That's one of the reasons why pre-operation transgender people kill themselves, because they're confused and depressed, and there's all these contradictions in their body and their mind, and their hormones are racing, and a lot of them are probably teenagers as well, so it's even worse for them. That's a mental illness. That is a mental illness. That's what they deal with, and that's why some of them transition to end that contradiction. When they look in the mirror, they hate themselves. Do you not understand? That is a mental illness. Only a mental illness could make you look in the mirror and hate it because you don't see yourself, or it's not what you think is you. That is an ignorant statement to make. That is mental illness, and that's horrible. That is a legitimately horrible. And maybe this is emotional, but I know I've talked to enough trans people to know about the horrors a lot of them have gone through. You know, some of them are I don't want to sound crass and, I don't know, ignorant maybe, but some of them obviously have more mental fortitude than others and just get confused. But then they recognise this is what they have, so they go and, the recommended channels, and they sort themselves out. Others, they don't, for whatever reason, because it's messing with their head. They're not thinking straight because it's a mental illness. How is, again, body dysmorphia, which is, I don't think it's necessarily related, but it's a very similar mental illness. We treat that, don't we? We stop people from cutting their limbs off, because that's what that is. That's like a mental illness where you think you shouldn't have a hand, or a finger, or a foot, or a thigh, or whatever, right? Never a head, though, interestingly, but I don't know. These people want to remove body parts because they don't think they should have it. We don't remove those particular digits. Hell, if anybody remembers this thing that happened on the internet, like Justin Wang did a video, right? There was this guy who was in chronic pain, right, with his feet. Something happened to him, and he wanted to remove them to end his pain, but but the doctors wouldn't let him, because I think there may have been a law against it. Even when the person is under excruciating pain, we still don't remove body parts that actually... We won't remove the body part, even if it might actually make them feel better. But apparently transgender is different. Apparently we should just remove somebody's genitals and give them hormones and drugs that will change them forever. Whether or not it's the best thing for them. And apparently that's not a mental illness, that's just being normal. If it's not a mental illness, then what is it? And if it's not a mental illness, why do they need to transition? And if it's not a mental illness, why do they feel so mentally ill?
Transgender just means that your sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with your sex.
That is a mental illness. That should not happen.
Some trans people do have gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness, but you don't need to have gender dysphoria to be transgender.
Since when? Since when did you not have to have gender dysphoria to be transgender? What else do you have that makes you do that? What? That does not make... That goes against all the people who I've ever met who are trans, who are legitimately trans and transition, you know, or just happen to be under that umbrella, you know? Because I suppose it could be a spectrum, I don't know, like autism, maybe. What? Can anybody here enlighten me on how this is the case? Is there anybody trans in the audience? Is there anybody who can tell me what the hell is going on? Because this is insane. The guy's he's done a complete 180. He's gone complete fucking gender positive, hasn't he? Like, what? Wow, I don't believe that. Now, I could respond to my own video, but I don't think I will. It's far too long. It's 40 odd minutes long. But, Jesus. That is all manner of wrong. That's not even factually correct. His videos are still terrible.
When gender dysphoria is alleviated through surgery, social transitioning, hormones, that does...
I don't think social transitioning is actually a thing. I suppose that means you're living your life as a woman when you're a man, right? So you're wearing women's clothes, you go to the women's bathroom and things like that. That's social transitioning, apparently. But there are people who do that, but they're not socially I don't believe socially transitioning is actually a thing. I think I know what they mean. They mean when you start referring to yourself as a she, when you announce to the world that you are transgender and now you're going to be a she at some point, right? I guess that's social transitioning, but I've never seen that as transitioning. Transitioning to me is the physical aspect, and the social aspect kind of just goes along with that, right? I don't know.
Doesn't mean that this person is no longer transgender just because they no longer have gender dysphoria. And I already know I'm going to get some people in the comments.
Well, technically they still do have it, right? I don't think it's something that ever... Maybe it does go away after, you give them the hormones. I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, it could still linger, right? I mean, what? There are people who are autistic who learn to control it, right? They learn to be more socialized, right? They learn social skills, but they still have it. It doesn't go away.
Comment section saying something along the lines of...
So then, if trans people don't have a mental illness, then why do they commit suicide at such a higher rate?
Nobody ever says it like that, though. Nobody's laughing. It's a serious issue. And again, it's a point worth raising. I just raised it, and I guess he's going to go into it now. But why?
Got him!
White males commit suicide at a higher rate. Do you think it's because white male is a mental illness? Or
false equivalence.
do you think societal pressures contribute to the suicidality of white males? Let's stop.
Again, people commit suicide for loads of different reasons. You can't just say with white men that it's... Actually, it's men in general. It's not white men that kill themselves higher than anyone else. It's men across the board, right? Men just kill themselves in record numbers recently. Now, yeah, part of it is societal pressures, but not always. And in a lot of cases, it is just men seem to be statistically better at killing themselves. Because women, technically, if I remember, this might have changed in 2020, but the last statistics that I saw, women commit suicide, they try to commit suicide more, but they don't actually kill themselves. So they commit it more, but they don't actually kill themselves more. Men seem to be able to kill themselves more than women do, although they don't attempt it as much. So technically speaking, you could argue that there's something wrong with women if they're trying to kill themselves constantly more than men, but ultimately they don't kill themselves as much. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. And likewise, we shouldn't say that it's necessarily, you are right, that it's transitioning that has killed these trans people. It could be anything. It could have been that the transitioning cured their gender dysphoria, potentially, or, made them feel better. But then something else happened, and they killed themselves, or they accidentally killed themselves. Maybe it was an overdose, maybe they were driving, I don't know, had a brain fart, pressed the wrong pedal and flew off and went over a bridge. Who knows, right? Look, there's a load of dumb ways you can kill yourself by accident, right? You're right. However, it seems to me like a lot of them do kill themselves because ultimately they are not happy about what's happened. They're not satisfied with the transition. And in fact, I think the most famous case of that was the John Money situation with those two twins, when he forcibly tried to turn people who don't have gender dysphoria into transgender people, and ultimately, I think both of them did end up killing themselves. They, unfortunately, even though they don't have gender dysphoria, they weren't actually trans. Their situation, though, in terms of the operation not working for them, that kind of thing. If I'm trying to word this correctly and I'm not trying to mess it up. That situation, whereas you have a transitioning operation and it doesn't work, it seems to me to be quite a lot of the cases where they try to kill themselves. I could be wrong. The major difference is that some reason it's seen as something to celebrate without the sex change. There's no kind of schizophrenia pride. We're not being told to see it as a good thing. Exactly, because it's not a good thing. Yes, because people asking the question totally laugh while asking it, not strawmanning. Yeah, he is strawmanning. But again, it's a good question worth asking. Why? Hello, Felfop. How do you do? Many of the men who kill themselves do have mental health conditions, but that condition isn't being a man, it's stuff like depression. He's not saying that. It's like a rhetorical question, Harley. He's saying, we don't say they kill themselves because they're white, right? But nobody says it's necessarily because they're trans that they kill themselves. I mean, you could argue it is, but it seems to be most of the cases, it's because they realised the transition didn't work, and they're still seeing, the person in the mirror and they don't like it, I don't know. Again, it depends on the individual, but it seems to me like in a lot of cases, it is because the transitioning failed.
Acting like the higher rate of suicide is somehow proof that transgender people are mentally ill,
But they are. And the gender dysphoria creates even more problems for them. It gives them depression, anxiety. As mentioned in a lot of the studies that you cited, they are more likely to be anxious. They are more likely to be depressed. They are a vulnerable group when it comes to mental illness. Because you can, technically speaking, have more than one mental illness. You can. Obviously, you can't have ones that contradict each other, so you can't be borderline and autistic. That's just impossible. As far as I'm aware, that is impossible because the two are complete opposites. But you can be autistic and be depressed. You can be depressed and have schizophrenia. You can have bipolar and be depressed. I guess basically you can have clinical depression and whatever, but there's, you can have more than one. You can be ADHD and schizophrenic and also have, I don't know, dyspraxia or whatever, But yeah, gender dysphoria is a mental illness. When mentally you feel that you're not something that you ought to feel mentally, so physically you're a man, but you think you're a woman, there's something wrong in your head. Something's not quite working. And I hate to say it, but that is the truth.
And shouldn't be accepted or something. Trans people have a higher suicide rate because of social stigma, not...
That's something that requires a citation. But likewise, even me saying that most likely, from what I've gathered on my own journey and talking to people, saying that most likely it seems to be in general transitioning not working requires a citation. But there's not a lot of work on this. There really isn't a lot of data. And with suicide, you never know why people kill themselves. Because not every person leaves a note. So me and you shouldn't be saying it's social stigma or they look in the mirror and realise the transition didn't work. But it does But again, what societal stigma though? Trans people are, they're less accepted now because of the activists and people like you. But up until recently, they were accepted. And in fact, they've been accepted for at least, I would say, 30 to 40 years. because they wouldn't. There was never an issue with them until recently, when trans activists started bringing it up as if there were issues. Because what a lot of people don't realise is, historically, trans people were never historically, it was never really raised. It was never really an issue, as far as I'm aware. I mean, transvestites obviously were attacked, right? But they're not trans people. They're men who are gay or whatever. They dress up as women, right? Of course, they're going to be attacked for their lifestyle, right? In these previous societies, that in the 60s and the 50s and 40s, right? But transgender people, sure, there is bigotry against them, but most people probably weren't aware of them until the very recent past, right? It seems to be up until the 20th. Sorry, guys. In the early 21st century, it wasn't something that was on people's radars. It was more gay people and lesbians where a lot of the bigotry went towards. Because I remember, my nan used to tell me, this documentary or whatever that she saw about this. She was I think she was one of the first British trans people, and she went to, I forgot her name. She transitioned in Casablanca, or something like that, in the 60s, because they didn't do it over here. But she seemed to live her life normally after that, right? After her transition, she even married somebody in nobility. It just seemed to me like they were there, but most people just didn't notice them. If that makes any... I don't even know how to explain it, Hello, Neela. There was a sort of third sex, particularly in Asian cultures and some Asian cultures, and the third sex was an umbrella term for people who were infertile physically or psychologically. But that's not a third sex. That's just cultures not understanding science and trying to differentiate people who are infertile or think differently. I don't particularly want kids. That doesn't mean I'm a third sex. I'm a man who doesn't want kids. So I know what you're trying to say, but these cultures are wrong. They're wrong. That doesn't justify, the transgender activists and what they want. But I don't know.
Because they're transgender. This 2012 analysis of parental support for transgender youth actually found that just strong parental support alone drastically reduces the transgender person's likelihood of committing suicide. In fact, it cuts the likelihood of the transgender person attempting suicide from 57% to only 4%.
You could say that about anybody. You could say that the people who committed suicide in my family, who, by the way, probably did have parental support, if they had just a bit more, they wouldn't have killed themselves. But unfortunately, they did. And, I do agree in the case of one of my family members, if we did visit him more, if we did do things a bit differently, he would still be around. But he wasn't. He's not anymore, and that's our fault. But either way, that just supporting people mentally. Yeah, of course they're not going to kill themselves. What's new there? But you can't prove that it's social stigma, considering we're living in a time where there is a large amount of trans acceptance in the West. Even if slowly but surely, it's probably going to drop because of the authoritarian nature of the trans activists.
Here's a newer study using some information from a 2015 transgender survey.
So it's 5 years out of date, potentially, but okay.
They found that respondents who experienced discrimination or were a victim of violence were more likely to report suicide thoughts and attempts.
Well, no shit. That could happen to anybody. A white man who lives in, the ghetto, right? Who lives in a poor white neighborhood, who could experience violence on the street, or he could be getting mugged or whatever. He could be discriminated for being, white trash, He might feel suicidal.
Access to gender-affirming medical care is associated with a lower prevalence of suicide thoughts and attempts.
Associated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it does lower it, though. So that's a case of correlation, but as we all know, guys, correlation does not equal causation.
So the reason transgender people have such a high suicide rate has nothing to do with them being transgender.
Well, for some of them it does, though. You can't just blanket say they killed themselves when wait, did he say vast majority or all of them? because he does tend to talk in absolutes. He's always done that.
Of suicide thoughts and attempts. So the reason transgender people have
Yeah, he's literally talking in absolutes.
such a high suicide rate has nothing to do with them being transgender and everything to do with the social stigma currently surrounding transgender people.
Notice how it says discrimination. What does that mean? What kind of discrimination? How are they being discriminated against? And what's the violence? Are they being attacked because they're trans? That ain't necessarily so, is it? That could just mean getting beaten up at school because the person don't like you. Or because you're weak, and that's what bullies do. It could be, oh, these are adults, aren't they? So it could be you got mugged. Right? And that makes you feel suicidal. Which it could do. That doesn't mean they mugged you because you were trans. They probably just saw you were an easy target and did so. Again, there's no context behind... And what kind of discrimination? Were they discriminated because of their colour? Were they discriminated because they were trans? And if it is... And what is it discrimination? Because, as we all know, that term has kind of been destroyed recently. That could mean anything. And 98% of people said that. I don't know. Something doesn't feel quite right. And it's only 4 cases, and that makes them suicidal. I think there's something already latent within these people. And again, you can't just say outright that transgender people in general don't kill themselves because they're trans. Again, obviously the gender dysphoria has to play a part in at least some of these cases. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it, would they? Even after transitioning.
Which is why I hope to continue to normalize transgender people.
They will never be normal. You can't normalize such things.
But come on, guys, we can just ignore that. Let's just keep giving out
Because, alright, here's something that I need to say about this. No matter, I might have said this in the video, no matter what you do, no matter how many times you try to normalize transgender people, you're never going to do it completely, because unfortunately, people can't live with the contradiction. They can't live with some of these people can't live with their own contradictions. People can't get past the uncanny valley look of some of these people. When they see that it's man guy, they don't see a woman, they see a man. And try as they may to do so to convince their brain to see a man, they don't. They see a man. They want to see a woman, they can't. You're not going to stop the average person from doing that. They will be polite and, refer to them by the pronouns, but you're never going to make them think, oh yeah, that's a woman. You're just not.
operations. That's what stupid people like to call smart. I'm like so pretentious and angry, and I sound so
You're even more pretentious and annoying even now. Psychologically, third sex, yeah, but they're not a sex, are they? They're not a third sex. Your Neve could be a 40%er. I don't know what that is. Oh, is that the suicide attempt rate? It's a scam? I don't know. I don't know what a 40%er is. You're gonna have to educate me on that, guys. Oh, suicide rate. Okay. Yeah, men and women smell different. Definitely, that is true. We do. Look, I don't know. None of what he said is... Some of what he says is true, but most of it is bullshit.
Juvenile and stupid. That's what stupid people call smart. Is that supposed to be a roast? Also, what's with this conservative narrative? Because I still see a lot of conservatives pushing this same kind of shit that I was saying back then about, like, giving out operations. No one's just...
They do, though. They do.
Giving out operations.
They do. Literally, literally there was an expose a few years ago in the British press of school kids. I mean, it's boys too, but because it's girls, it reached headline news because that's just how society works. Of young girls who are mainly autistic being convinced they're being pink-pilled by their peers and possibly by other people, namely activists, possibly even teachers, into believing they are trans when they're actually lesbians or bi or just, I don't know, they don't know what they are, right? They're autistic. They're going to be socially more susceptible to being, confused by such things. They're being fast-tracked into gender surgery because they've come out as non-binary, and some of them are going to get rid of their breasts and things like that. They're going to transition into males, even though they're not. They're not male. They don't actually have gender dysphoria, but they are nonetheless. That is happening. That's happening in the UK and it's happening in America. And that's why the trans lobby is trying to push to allow transitioning of kids. This is happening. That is not a conservative narrative. That is reality. And you can pretend to ignore reality. You know, you can sit there and in your leftist bubble, because you just move from one bubble to another, and say that this isn't happening, but that is the case. And I'll just let you talk now because I've already debunked what you're going to say.
A sex reassignment surgery is really expensive, and it takes a lot of consultation with doctors and therapists before undergoing that surgery.
Used to, but not anymore.
You don't just walk into the doctor like, I used to not like the color pink, but now it's not so bad. And the doctor's just like, cut her dick off!
But they do. Literally, when I was reading Wikipedia, people who are gender non-conforming, so people who aren't even, like you said, people who don't even have gender dysphoria are being brought into these clinics. You know, teenagers who are maybe slightly tomboyish, boys who are observed, you know, putting on their mum's high heels, which is probably what a lot of guys have done, are being brought into these clinics and then diagnosed with gender dysphoria and then fast-tracked to eventually be put on puberty blockers. That is happening.
Truth is, gender is not a social construct.
It's not.
The entire notion that
What does he say now, I wonder?
gender is just a social construct and you can pick and choose your gender is a bunch of Tumblr bullcrap. It makes me feel bad, but it also makes me sad that there are a lot of people out there who at one point watched this and thought, fuck yeah, he's telling the truth.
But it's not a social construct. Gender is simply a synonym of sex. That's literally what it is.
About transgenders. Let's talk about this whole gender is a social construct thing.
Please do.
And what that means. Because listen, I get it. I know that a bunch of cringy blue-haired libcucks have completely ruined any time you even hear the phrase social construct. Instantly your libcuck senses start tingling. So I get it. I know that the social construct thing sounds kind of cringy. But just if something is a social construct doesn't mean it doesn't exist. For example,
you can't just say it's a social construct and then say, oh, but it does exist. No, when they say it's a social construct, that means they say that gender doesn't exist. That's what they're saying, and you know that's what they're saying. Again, I don't understand how you can go from what he used to be to this. He's actually more reasonable in that video, even though he's stupid and, you know, when he's trying to craft his message, he crafts it in a terrible way. But I don't know.
Money is a social construct. Here's a pretty
No, money's not a social construct. Money is an economic construct. Money is a tool. Money's not a social construct. That's not... Money is a tool used for transactions. It's to replace bartering. So as opposed to selling 5 cows for 2 sheep, you instead use a medium of exchange. Money. So you would pay for the 4 cows, £400, and then you would pay the other person, say 250, for the sheep. It's not a social construct, it's a tool. A social construct is something that's more, I would say something, it's a meme, isn't it, in the Dawkins sense. That's what a social construct is, it's a meme. It's something that is passed down to people, it's an idea that's passed down. So the state, for example, could be a social construct, because it's how human beings have evolved a meme to run society, right? Anarchy is probably not a social construct, it's something more natural, but I don't know.
Easy way to figure out whether something is or is not a social construct. If humans didn't exist, would that thing exist? If all humans cease to exist, then money would cease to exist as well. Hence, money is a social construct, along with the worth we prescribe to it. So
The worth is subjective, yes, but money itself is not a social construct, it's a tool. It's a physical tool. A social construct is something that isn't necessarily physical, as far as, in my opinion, I don't know.
Money, gender is also a social construct. So let me explain what I mean by that.
But again, he just creates the worst possible analogies. It just doesn't make sense. Think of a different analogy, Hunter.
First, it's really important that we define our terms. There is sex and there is gender.
No, the two are mutually inclusive, not mutually exclusive, sorry. Originally, gender was a synonym, and it is.
They are different things with different meanings, and the medical
They don't actually.
and academic consensus agrees that recognizing the difference between sex and gender is important, and the distinction between sex and gender would exist regardless of labels. Sex refers to the gametes that your body naturally produces. In this context, sex also means biological traits, testosterone, genitals, hormones, chromosomes. Obviously, these things are physically real and they're
Then why do people deny it?
distributed bimodally. Gender, on the other hand, refers to the way society expects.
But that's not how traditionally it was used. And that's not how we use that either. Because when we refer to things like this, we refer to the sex of the person, don't we? And how they express that sex, right? So really, you could just say this is how they sexually refer to themselves or express themselves, right? I don't know.
Males or females to express themselves based off of the fact that they have traits that heavily correlate with male and female biology. And this has changed over time. Right now, if a man is going to a business meeting, he would wear a suit. There's nothing biological about a man
Women also wear suits. What's your point?
wearing a suit and a woman wearing a dress. Wearing a dress or wearing a suit is not intrinsic to male or female. Let's also not forget.
But kind of is though, isn't it? If you think about it, they're designed in a certain way to reflect certain characteristics of the human body, right? To accentuate things, right? Like a female suit is not the same as a male suit. They're actually different. The women wear blouses and they wear different kinds of trousers and jackets. Like it fits, the contours of their shape. Likewise, a male suit does too, because a male suit is basically just a square. That's all it is. Well, a female's suit is more, hourglass shaped, I guess, right? So even these things that are considered constructs, right, do reflect these other things, right? Maybe I'm saying the exact same thing he is, but I don't think it's fair to say they're not intrinsically anything. They are. There is, of course, unisex clothes. Obviously, they do exist. Like a jumper, technically, is unisex. But then it's the design of the jumper in terms of like what do they put on it. Sometimes the colour, though not always, which determines whether it's a male one or a female one. But of course, inherently, the design of it is not.
Forget that back in the day, men would wear high heels.
Men still wear heels. There's that has not changed at all. But we've just changed. I think what we have done is change the word, because high heels, for whatever reason, in our language has become a term for women's shoes. So the stiletto thing, things like that. But really, these are just boots. That's what they are. Because high heels originally were things that you would wear in. It was a Persian. I think it was a Persian invention to help you ride a horse. So tall people, small people would all wear high heels to help ride a horse. I don't know if that was because they didn't have stirrups. I assume they did. Persians had stirrups. The stirrup was invented 1,000 years ago, maybe more. Whatever, the heel helps you ride a horse. That's why they wear boots, right? That's what it was for. But then, I think it was the British. When we went over there on not colonial issues, but certainly trying to, get some of that oil, we discovered high heels, and the small Brits were like, hey, I can look massive in this. And so they wore things like that. And today, they still wear them. I myself sometimes wear boots. Obviously not with a heel that massive, Jesus, but, men still wear boots. Punks wear, Doc Martens, things like that. That's not changed. We've just, if anything, it's just the way we refer to a man's heels and a women's heels. That's what's changed. For some reason, high heels is just default women, but boots is more men, although not always, because women also wear boots. But yeah, men have not stopped wearing high heels. It's just, I don't know, it's a weird language thing that's developed. I don't know. Maybe guys didn't like being referred to as high heels, but then again, we still call Cuban heels. So
Men wore tunics. Our founding
we still wear tunics, technically. Also, that's not a tunic. Hang on. Wasn't that like a
back in the day, men would wear high heels. Men wore tunics.
I don't think that's a tunic, is it? That's not a tunic. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a long tunic. But some men still wear tunics. A tunic can just be a shirt, you know, like a jersey. You know, that's a tunic, technically.
Our founding fathers wore wigs. Hell,
Not all of them. Again, the wig thing depends really what social class you were.
before the 20s, women didn't even wear pants. These are all examples.
Technically they did. Just underneath the dress, technically, but I guess they wouldn't be called pants, maybe pantaloons. I don't know. I have seen pictures of women in like the 1890s wear trousers, I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong. Women's trousers 1800s. I'm pretty sure they've always have done. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's women wearing trousers in the 1800s, pre-1920s. I knew I'd seen it. I knew I wasn't wrong. So that's not true at all.
Examples of societal gender roles which have changed over time.
But that's not your role, that's just expressing oneself. And fashion changes.
So let's make one thing clear. No one is arguing that a transgender woman, someone biologically male but identifies as a female, no one is arguing that her penis magically transforms into a vagina.
That's what some people literally want us... Maybe not literally, but a lot of people want us to believe that magically does not seem to, you know... How do I explain this? What do they believe? Yeah, they literally want us to believe that shouldn't matter. That they are just women. Just women. But they're not. Even you've admitted that they're not.
Just because they say so. It just means
But we're told we're told to just accept it because they say so.
that the transgender woman is more comfortable aligning with the social roles associated with women.
But they don't tend to, really, do they? They just dress like one. But their social roles, I would argue, don't really change. Like, well, what role are they actually adopting? Because as far as I'm aware, they just individually live their lives the way they see fit. They just dress and look the part. But as far as I'm aware, they don't really do that, do they? It'd be interesting to see what professions trans people work in, to see if they reflect more male profession, quote-unquote, or a female, quote-unquote, profession. Because that would be interesting, because, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's someone like Blair White, obviously, she's into makeup and things like that, so there's that. But then there's somebody like Frozen Binary, a friend of mine. She is I think she's in IT. She does coding and things like that. That's primarily more of a male thing, although she is trans. It'd be interesting to see that, actually, if your social role does change when you transition, because I think it's more 50-50. I think some of them change it, some of them don't. Again, it's up to them.
Because society will be more likely to accept them as such due to the expectations of people of a certain identity to
Or maybe people just naturally gravitate towards that, you know?
look, sound, dress, or act a certain way. And no, I don't care about what hairy, ugly, lacy Green has to say. I care about facts, and I care about reality.
But again, there's something to it that people seem to naturally gravitate towards that. It's not something that's constructed. Because they have done studies, haven't they, with chimpanzees, male ones and female ones, and the male ones gravitated towards tools and things like that, things like cars and, you know, toys. They went towards the human boys' toys, and the female ones went for the baby dolls and things like that. So there's something in it, isn't there? This is, to me, it's a reflection of most people. I don't know. Again, live and let live. That's my thing. Whatever makes you happy.
Facts and reality. I haven't used one legitimate source.
You did, to be fair, but you just don't consider it legitimate anymore.
Just to point out, male and female, that's sex. Man and woman is gender.
What? Male and female and man and woman are synonyms of each other. See, this is the thing. They try to change language, don't they? To fit whatever it is they want to believe. But nobody uses male and female as a separate thing from man and woman. I've never met anyone in real life who does that. And in speech we don't.
This is mixing up sex and gender, and
He's not, though. I mean, you're not. Previous you wasn't, I don't know.
that's exactly why these conspiracy theorists who still believe that sex and gender are the exact same thing.
It's not a conspiracy theory. How's that? That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just poisoning the well. That doesn't ad hominem. Come on, seriously.
Sounds so stupid. Only facts do. And remember, facts always trump feeling.
God, he was cringe back then, wasn't he? Oh my god.
It's funny how I keep on saying, like, common sense, facts and logic, facts trump
To be fair, you show more common sense in the previous video than you have done now.
feelings, but yet I'm not actually providing any facts.
You did. You've not really shown any facts either. You've just shown pseudo-scientific waffle, which is ironic because that's what you're trying to say about your previous self.
I'm just making a lot of uneducated assertions in a really angsty teen,
And now you do it as a 23-year-old.
juvenile approach. This absolutely ridiculous idea opens the door to all kinds of insanity. For example, this 52-year-old father ditched his family and now identifies as a 6-year-old girl. Obviously, this is a slippery slope fallacy, like if we accept
But it actually is happening right now as we speak.
trans people, next thing you know, people are going to start identifying as children and having sex with their dogs, and you've heard them all before.
But it is happening, isn't it? Slate didn't release those pro-pedo articles without any reason now, did they?
Person is just like a nutcase. Age is not a social construct, whereas gender is. Time
I think a lot of the MAP people would disagree with you on that. A lot of the maps would vehemently disagree and say actually it is, and there's no difference between a child and an adult. Let's have a look at the chat. It's been a while, guys. Social construct, concept perception. A concept perception based on collective views. A phenomenal convention. So yeah, money is a tool, not a construct. Or at least it is a construct, it's just not a social one. Suits make yourself look like your posture look better, like the sore shoulders. I didn't know that. Maybe I should have a look in the mirror. I didn't know about that. Sex irrespective species. Hunter doesn't understand words. He doesn't. Yeah, her penis. I know. Her penis. Again, he must recognise some of the contradictory nature of his language, right?
Time is a fact, and we've always measured time the same way.
No, we haven't actually. We haven't always measured time the same way. In fact, for a long time, maybe this is a nitpick. I shouldn't nitpick, but the Gregorian calendar is not the same as the Julian calendar. Likewise, the Islamic calendar is not the same as the Christian ones, and likewise, the Chinese one is not the same. And in fact, it took us a long time to figure out that there's actually 24 hours in the day, and the 60 seconds and 60 minutes and things like that. You know, we used to get it almost exactly right in the ancient Greek times, but it took us a while to truly get it to the dot. So we have always, and even then, subjectively thinking about time in the philosophical sense, we haven't really viewed it the same way. That's why time is such an interesting concept in that thing. But I don't know. I just thought I'd say.
Where gender has changed multiple.
Oh, he's talking about times. Oh well. Sorry, I thought he was going. I'm gonna make sure that's right.
Having sex with their dogs, and you've heard them all before. This person is just like a nutcase. Age is not a social construct, whereas gender is. Time is a fact, and we've always measured time the same way, where gender has changed multiple times throughout history.
But it hasn't. It hasn't. Ultimately, every society is still. Well, actually, no, not everything, but actually, no. In every society, men are still expected to be providers. Only in the West is it that women have the option of being one and the other. I mean, you do get nowadays. You do get house dads, house husbands, stay-at-home dads they call them, but they're a minority, and it's not something expected of them even now. It's something that I think a lot of men actually would probably be more comfortable with, but you know, I'm not the kind of person who thinks necessarily that how do I explain this? I'm not a person who thinks necessarily that I can't think. What was I saying? I can't remember what I'm saying now. I'm blanking. Oh, I don't think that I just don't think that you know, every social role is perfect for every single person. Like I don't think every man is necessarily going to be fit to be a dad or to be going out being the main provider, because again, some guys can't handle that mentally. It's too much of a strain, you know. Maybe mentally they would be better off being somebody who looks after as opposed to providing. I don't know. It's worth looking into, isn't it? I don't know. But again, most human societies generally have had this dichotomy of men provide and protect and women look after and stuff like that, right? Although it's changing, obviously, in the West slowly. But again, on the whole, men are still expected to provide and do all the sacrifice and have the responsibility that has. Whereas with women, it seems in the West, it's more optional. They can choose to do both, but men don't really have that option, really.
According to the American Psychological Association, transgender people have virtually existed forever.
Well, really?
Transgender persons have been documented.
I mean, the transgender by our standards, right? So we're going on about time, right? But were they considered as such back then? I don't know.
In many indigenous Western and Eastern cultures and societies from antiquity until the
present. Because even now, like, what is a trans person has changed. Now you could be non-binary and still be fit into this umbrella term, right? You even said yourself that nowadays you don't even have to have the actual thing that makes you trans, gender dysphoria, to be trans, right? It's changed even within the last decade. So you can't really judge whether or not they are by our standards, because you're judging the past by our standards. You can't. They might well not be, you know. Like, for example, a lot of people say that, Alexander was bi or gay, but by whose societal standards was he, though? You know, he might not have been. And also, you got to remember, language is different as well. So they may be referring to a lot of these, people we would consider boyfriends, but they're not actually boyfriends. It's more like a bromance or something. They're a very close friend. There's talk that was it Harold Macmillan? Some people thought he was gay because he never had a wife or children or anything like that, and never seemed to, which is interesting though, because he never seemed to also be sexually interested in people. So some people say he's asexual. It seems that the people look at him differently depending on what time period they're living in.
Present day. So trans people have existed forever.
Again, that's something that's, again, maybe, but I think you've got to remember how these people are being described in the historical sources and what people at the time would have considered them as well. And do they really fit the definition,
This is such a bad argument to say, because of this gender stuff, now we see these crazy people.
But we are though, aren't we? That's something that is undeniable.
People happening. Like, the crazy people have nothing to do with transgender people.
But they kind of do, because people like Yaniv are, in the way, linked with people in the video that you mentioned. The guy who's pretending to be a 6-year-old. And as we've now learned, it's not something that's real. He does not think he's actually that, age. It's just a fetish. But nonetheless, people like Yaniv are using this to prey on people.
Trans people have existed forever, but crazy people have existed forever also.
Look in the mirror.
Even the Bible talks about King Nebuchadnezzar, who went crazy and thought that he was a cow or an ox. This is a legitimate disorder called boanthropy. It's a psychological disorder in which the sufferer believes he or she is a cow or ox. The most famous sufferer of this condition was King Nebuchadnezzar, who in the book of Daniel was driven from
But we don't try and turn them into cows.
men and did eat grass as oxen. This weird correlation I'm trying to make, that because of trans people now we see these crazy people, it's just completely ridiculous, and it has no bearing on reality.
But it kind of does, doesn't it?
Chromosomes are what give you your gender, and they cannot be changed. It doesn't matter how much testosterone or how much estrogen you get pumped into you.
That's not wrong.
Did I seriously just say chromosomes give you your gender?
Well, they kind of do, don't they? They are linked with it.
This is literally not true, and virtually every person is proof of this.
No.
Okay, I'm a man. I have a penis. I have never seen my chromosomes.
What does that mean? I've never seen my what? It's a biological. It's like you don't see your chromosomes because they're microscopic. That's why you don't see them.
dress the way I do and act
It's part of your genes. Oh my god.
the way I do because society has established that in order for me to make it known that I am in fact a man, I should dress and act a
But we don't need to dress that way to know that you are. If that was the case, I don't think human beings would have survived in the wild, you know? We don't need clothes to recognise if a person is what they say they are, you know? You don't need clothes to see if it's a woman or not. How stupid. Maybe you're that stupid, but I'm not that stupid. I don't need to look at somebody's clothes and think, oh yeah, that is a woman. I don't know if it's a woman. Could be a man deciding to dress in a kilt or a dress again. I don't know. That's a stupid thing to say. You don't need clothes.
certain way, aka gender. And also, again, chromosomes refer to sexual characteristics, not gender. Chromosomes have no bearing on anyone's gender, and
But they kind of do.
it's obvious because virtually no one has actually seen their chromosomes. What did I...
What? Why does he keep saying that? You can't even, technically, you don't even see your expression, right? At least you don't see the mental capacity within it that makes you do the things that you do. You know, you don't see the brain waves and the neurons firing. Like, it's so silly.
What did I honestly think here? Did I think that every human was just this neutral, clean slate, and the minute they get a peek of their chromosomes, they're like, XY chromosomes, time to wear a suit and grow...
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We aren't blank slates, actually. In Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate, there's been irrefutable evolutionary psychological evidence that proves that we're not blank slates. That genes do kind of... we're not completely... It's not to be confused with deterministic, right? But, determinism and all that. But there is something that is inherent in people. So, like personality and things like that. We're kind of born with it. It's not something that is grafted onto us necessarily. From the environment. It's not... What he's trying to say, is Steven Pinker, is that the environment is not the overwhelming 100% factor that forms us. There is biology, could well be 50%, could be 75%, Depends on the person.
grow my armpit hair out. The funny thing is, people who make this argument that chromosomes determine gender don't actually live by that standard. When you walk into a crowded restaurant, how do you know who's a woman and who's a man? I highly doubt you go around asking people to see their genitals or look at their chromosomes.
What? You do realise that the chromosomes have the DNA and stuff within it that will, or at least that's part of the code that makes you what you are, right? I don't think he understands how genetics and DNA work, does he? Otherwise he wouldn't be saying this. Planets determine us.
You creepy perv. No, based on social cues, how they dress, how they act, how they speak. In other words,
how they act. Interesting how you mentioned that. Is there a biological what's the word? I've forgotten the basis for that? Because he's trying to say it's not your chromosomes that you figure out how people are, which is true, but they do inform how people look, right? Because if I'm right, a chromosome is something that holds a lot of the genetic information that is required, right? I need to double check this. Oh god. Yeah, it's DNA, yeah. It's a molecule with part or all of the genetic material of an organism. Yeah. So technically speaking, even though you don't see the chromosome, you see the results of the chromosome. Just like how I mentioned earlier, just because you don't see the neurons firing in your brain doesn't mean you don't see the behaviour of the person, right? Or the expression of the person. It's silly. So they do inform it, because they carry the code that is required to make a man and a woman, right? That's what they mean by that.
Gender. Truth is, transgenders deserve rights just like everyone else, but they do not deserve extra rights.
That is something that everybody can get behind now, right? Now, or does he believe that they deserve privileges?
You want to go put on a dress and tell everyone you identify as a woman?
Yeah.
Great. You have the right to do that. You want to identify as a 6-year-old girl today and then be a cat tomorrow? Cool. Go for it. You have the right to be a transgender. Thank you for letting trans people know that they have the right to exist. Thanks.
It's funny how you tried to say that you were hateful and you didn't like them, right? But then you're totally cool about them existing, and you said you didn't think they were valid, but you're clearly validating them in that video by saying you have the right to, you know, express yourself, right, and do whatever, right? So you've kind of contradicted yourself in the video.
But you do not have the rights to infringe on other people's rights. I've seen this happen in locker rooms and bathrooms. All right. Let's stop here because this is about to get spicy.
Yeah, we can't possibly. Yeah, we can't possibly get into all this now, can we? Like, the Canadian laws have been in effect, you know.
Listen, I understand that a lot of people are uncomfortable around this bathroom topic.
It's literally a non-issue. The bathroom issue is a non-issue. It was never an issue until the activists made it an issue. Nobody had this issue. It was something that was developed to create a problem that cannot be solved so that they can make money out of it. That's what it is. Pure and simple. That's it. Trans people used to use the toilet and bathroom or whatever. Nobody had an issue with it. And if they did, suck it, right? They're going to use the toilet they need to use, okay? And it seemed to me like the common sense used to rule is, like, if you've not fully transitioned and you still look like male, for example, you still use the male toilet. Then as you slowly transition, and, you know, socially or whatever, you then start to use the other one, right? That was like the common sense thing. And then this issue was created where, oh, they need neutral bathrooms and things like that when they didn't need to, because it was already solved. Just use your common sense and, you know, use what you need to use, right? Just be aware of your environment and things like that, and, you know, where you are currently, and everything will be fine, right? That's literally what it was for years and years and years, and then now all of a sudden things need to change to accommodate something to fix something that ain't broken. It's a non-issue. It's not an issue.
I used to be one of those people. I remember saying shit like, oh, well, if we let transgender people use the bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity, that could be putting women in danger. First of all, that's...
But the thing is, though, there are people who pretended and did put people's lives in danger, though. That did happen because of the activism, saying that if they saying that they can just identify as however they want.
Just misandry. That comes from the idea that trans people are men, and therefore men are somehow dangerous. Not to...
That's interesting, isn't it? Now, yeah, there is a misandric element to it when the TERFs say it, when the trans exclusionary radical feminists say it, that is misandry, you're right. But not everybody necessarily says it from a I don't think a lot of people say it because they hate men. A lot of them say it because they know there will be opportunists who will use this to pretend to be something that they're not in order to prey on people, and that has happened, unfortunately. But there I am, obviously a minority, but that does happen.
To mention, rape is illegal regardless of who's doing it or where it's taking...
True in theory, but technically speaking, in many countries, men cannot be raped by women, legally. In my country, that is not the case, unless an object is used. So if a woman were to do whatever, you know, drug me, or if she was physically stronger than me and held me down, and then, you know, went on top of me, or what have you, that's not rape.
Place.
Legally, that is, anyway. And when we tried to get it changed, the government said no. We're not going to change it.
But this whole segment about how trans people deserve rights but not extra rights doesn't even make sense.
You mean privileges. You mean privileges. That means that, look, they deserve equal rights, but they can't have more rights because then it wouldn't be equal. So, for example, for example, I can be let's just go back to the 1900s. Men had more rights than women because most men, though not all men obviously, but middle class men could vote, but women, middle class women, working class women, upper class women could not, because of the way the voting worked. That means that men had more rights than them, even though constitutionally they had the same basic rights, if you know what I'm trying to say. But there's still inequality there, right? That's what you're trying to say in the video. That's what I'm getting from you anyway. You mean privileges, not extra rights, I suppose.
It's because the bathroom discussion has nothing to do with your rights.
It kind of does, though. They did say they framed it in a human rights frame of right in a frame. That's what they did. But of course, it's nothing to do with human rights, you know.
So by allowing trans people to use the bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity,
again, it's a non-issue. Who cares? It's an issue that has been drummed up to create change, where change is not needed, or to push through something else. It's like the Motte and Bailey, I guess they would say.
this is not putting women in danger. This is not stepping on anyone's right.
Maybe not on people's rights, but it certainly is putting some people in danger.
And I can tell you firsthand that I used to get really upset about this whole transgender bathroom issue.
I get upset because it's not an issue, and it shouldn't be, but whatever.
I made videos on it. I talked about it in this video. I mean, I was so hung up on it. I was so worried about the women. But thankfully, after looking at some data, it turns out, and this is such a relief, my fears are completely unfounded. Here is a gender identity non-discrimination laws and public accommodations review. It's a review of evidence regarding safety and privacy in public restrooms, locker rooms,
But how come we saw a load of stuff in the media of people being assaulted
and changing rooms? This study finds that the passage of such laws is not related to the number or frequency of criminal incidents in these spaces. Additionally,
interesting how they suddenly don't find any correlation or causation at all.
The study finds that reports of privacy and safety violations in public restrooms, locker rooms, and
They are rare, but that doesn't mean that the number can't increase, and that laws such as that can't have an effect, though.
changing rooms are exceedingly rare. This study provides evidence that
But again, these are the same people that try to claim that government intervention doesn't cause economic problems, and that the solution to economic problems is more government interference, and that it's actually capitalism that's a problem. So I would take this with a huge grain of salt.
that fears of increased safety and privacy violations as a result of non-discrimination laws are
Again, Yaniv, right? Yaniv is a classic example of this, right? Where they went to a masseur who, I think she was somebody who exclusively did women, or maybe she did men, but obviously, you know, your back and things like that, you know, the usual things. And when Yaniv wanted their balls to be massaged and they said no, they tried to sue them. Again, there's been more cases like that since these laws have been in effect than there were before. But apparently there's no effect.
not empirically grounded. So there you have it, a really big relief. It doesn't appear that allowing trans people to use the bathroom of
I like how he just uses one source to confirm things and not a load of others to kind of come to some kind of consensus. You know, that's what I do, because, you know, maybe this is what we do in the history profession, what we used to. But what we would do is we would read a variety of sources, be that primary or secondary, right? Usually, you would rather it be primary, but if you're doing a secondary source thing, right? If you're just researching secondary sources, you would read to get the idea of what actually went on. And if people keep saying things constantly over and over again, you found some kind of consensus, haven't you? Which means, therefore, that thing must have happened. And if you check the sources, you can discover that yes, they're using the same sources, or they're using different sources, but that matches this other source. That's what he should be doing, but he's not. He did that a little bit before, but it was very clearly biased. You know, he wasn't going to, well, what did this place say that isn't on this particular spectrum, or what did this place say from a different point of view in terms of what they're looking at, like the angle, or maybe they have a different expertise in a certain area, right? He wasn't doing that. Like, if I'm learning about Nazi Germany, I'm going to read the primary sources, so I'm going to have to read Mein Kampf and Churchill's books, and I'm going to have to read loads of political stuff that was going on at the time, right? But then I'd also read secondary sources, so what historians are saying. So I would read what Richard J. Evans writes. I would read what I'm trying to think of a right-wing World War II historian. I can't think of one at the moment. There is a few, but I've forgotten. I forgot. There's some conservative ones. A.J.B. Taylor, he was more anti-German, literally, in that sense. And then I would read somebody who's more pro-German, like Niall Ferguson. Niall Ferguson, there's one. I would read him. Then I would read somebody like Fisher, who's German, but he's very clearly a German who thinks that it was German aggression that caused it and things like that. I would read all these people, and I would come to some kind of, consensus. If there was more evidence pointing towards German aggression that caused World War One and Two, I would side more with Fisher. Or if not, I would side more with Ferguson. But again, that's what I would do, but he doesn't seem to be really doing that. He seems to be compiling numerous sources, or just one, from a very particular side, and then saying that therefore it's true, but it's not.
Of their gender identity is putting anyone at risk, except for the trans person, because transgender people are also far more likely to be victims of abuse rather than the other way around.
The citation needed.
Again, your rights as a transgender do not trump anyone else's rights. Being transgender is a mental illness, hardly heroism, and if we start calling it what it is, we can work together to fix the problem.
I've had actual trans people say that as well. And a lot of them have said to me that because they're not treating it as a serious condition that it is, that it's going to be eventually very difficult for them to get help,
And help those who are currently suffering. I like how I just spread a bunch of debunked bullshit.
But you didn't really debunk it,
And a bunch of it was also really bigoted and based on my own discomfort with trans people.
You don't sound in any particular discomfort in that video. You feel more... it's you reacting to cringe, obviously. That's why you're really in discomfort. But I feel you're less comfortable now than you were back then.
And then I try to wrap it up with but let's just help those who are suffering by saying...
But we shouldn't we? And I guess you're trying to accuse yourself of grifting. I mean, you were always grifting. But what you say there is not wrong. We should help people, right? If they have an issue that needs fixing, it should be fixed, right?
It's not normal and that they're really strange and weird and that...
I mean, some of them are weird. I'm weird, but I'm not trans. Some people are weird. But that doesn't mean that they're the norm,
We shouldn't accept this, despite the...
But you didn't say, I keep saying he, but you didn't say that they shouldn't be accepted as people. It should just be accepted, look, this isn't the norm, but they are still people. Again, geniuses are not the norm, but we accept them, don't we? Hell, stupid people actually, stupid people are the norm. Okay, clinically, people who have very low IQ and can't function are not the norm, but we try to help them, don't we? Because they need help to function. I couldn't think of a decent one then.
The fact that the data completely contradicts my claims?
It contradicts, but doesn't necessarily prove it wrong.
What? Okay, but there you guys have it. Trans people are valid. Don't be a loser. Don't be a bigot. Trust data.
Trust data. Right, okay. Trust data that confirms your worldview. Right? That's obviously biased.
Science. Facts over feelings, bitch. Let's go. Please give this video a...
Okay, that's it. That's the end. Okay, that's it. So what's changed? Well, he simply just flipped-flopped. That's all he's done. He's become the opposite. He's basically the person who he's responding to in that video. And as for me, I wouldn't say I've changed... Well, I'd have to watch my own video, but I don't like my early content. But I would say that I've changed somewhat, but largely it's still the same. Just, look, it's not the norm, but whatever, just let them live their lives. If they feel like they need to transition, let them. If they don't want to transition, then obviously something else needs to be done to help them and things like that. That's my opinion. All the rest of it, I don't know. I think I agree with some of the points he made in that more than I used to. But the thing is, he didn't go through the whole video. He only went through certain points. Because I remember there was points that I had to respond to that was obviously wrong. But anyway, I don't know. That's the end of the stream, guys. Thank you for joining. And until next time, I will see you all later. Ciao.